Today, Colt and I are joined by our dear friend, Allan Calogne, who's currently serving as the Chief People Officer for Bon Secours Mercy Health in Cincinnati, Ohio. Allan has a very storied career as a human resources executive, and he's going to share with us today his thoughts on elevating people.
Yeah, so really, we're going to learn from Allan why is it such an important time to focus on and invest in elevating your people? That's number one. Number two, how do you do that? How do you make your people as amazing and valuable as they possibly can be? And then number three, perhaps most important, if you do that, how do you set up a culture that ensures that those people want to continue spending that value in your organization? Let's go. Are you looking for a positive influence in your personal or professional life?
Do you need some inspiration?
Hi, I'm Colt Briner.
And I'm Sarah Armstrong.
We're on a journey of elevation,
learning and sharing what we discover about how to live fulfilling lives and bring out the best in those around us.
Join us as we explore multiple perspectives, ideas, and influences on our own personal journeys of elevation.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Elev8AF. We are so excited today to be joined by one of our dear friends, Allan Calogne. Allan, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We are so excited to have Allan here. So a little bit of background, Colt and Allan and I worked together in a previous organization, and we just really love all the things that Allan is about. He's certainly very people-focused, very purposeful, very intentional about how he operates personally and professionally, and is just someone that I admire greatly. So we're very pleased to have him as a guest. And we're going to talk about how to elevate people specifically on today's episode. So we hope that all of our listeners come away with a few little tips and tricks and a great mindset on how to elevate people. So thanks, Allan.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you. And Colt, appreciate it as well.
Right on. Awesome. It's great to have you here, man.
All right, well, let's just dive in. So, Allan, can you think about elevating people in the context of elevating people? Why is it important to think about elevating people? And then beyond that, why is it important to think about it now specifically and in other times of economic downturn?
Honestly, I think you need to survive, quite frankly. I think in the labor market we're in, and certainly in healthcare specifically, it's been just a crazy labor market, really driven by the pandemic. Inflation right now is just crushing to a lot of industries, in particular healthcare. But frankly, if we're not thinking about elevating talent, that talent's going to find somewhere else to elevate themselves. So I think we as leaders within our culture, within our organization, need to think about growth, challenge, experience, opportunity. So in the absence of that, we're seeing it in, the Great Resignation. People are going to look elsewhere. And from my point of view, being in HR, organizational success hinges on finding the right talent, engaging that talent, motivating that talent. And again, I think even in spite of the economy and the challenges we're having, we need to find a way to double down and make it right for the associate.
Yeah. I mean, I can see what you're saying in the marketplace playing out right now. It's definitely a critical time for employers to be able to offer, not just I have the paycheck over here, same as they have the paycheck over there, but we can help you develop yourself, build your career. That if you're going to spend your time with us, yes, the paycheck's there, but also all the extra things. So let's unpack what the extra things can be. So let's say we've got a business leader who's listening right now. They just heard you explain how critical it is, why it's important to be able to develop people. And if you want to keep them, that you have to be investing in them. What does it look like? Where's the place to start?
There's a lot of different places. I think you look at the intrinsic, you look at the extrinsic. From my perspective, I think just being a leader, it's a responsibility that we hold to identify and hire the best talent. But even more so, as we get that, it's coaching, it's involvement, it's pushing. And the notion of building talent, of of curating and ultimately shepherding that talent, it goes beyond you as an individual. It might even mean losing that person to another area, another leader, another department. So there's a level of selflessness that I think as a leader, it's just, to me, it's intrinsically rewarding, right? And I think for a
Yeah.
culture at the macro level, that's an intrinsically rewarding cultural attribute that I think every organization aspires to. I think from an extrinsic perspective, how do you do that? There's a lot of elements built in that. It's culture in terms of building data, dashboards, incentives, even policies play a part in that. We're seeing that within our organization. You look at some of the policies that we have in place, and some of those, maybe without even knowing they're doing it, are impeding the ability to elevate people, to challenge people through other experience. So, we've put a lot of energy towards identify what can we do to disentangle that and allow for a more what we call kind of frictionless mobility within our organization. We put a lot of dollars towards it as well. We're offering free tuition for some of our critical roles. So again, I think intrinsically, extrinsically, they all play together. But at the end of the day, do you want to be an organization that's known for identifying the best talent and growing that talent, or do you want to be an organization that's known for quelling that?
And I mean, that's great work that you're doing, Alan. And I know that you leading that for your organization comes from just a place of really believing in this as part of your core values. So less about what's going on in the market. Yes, recognizing the market and making those market adjustments, but certainly investing and elevating others is really about who you are as a person in your personal life. And so my question for you is, as because you talked about this being a role for a leader, how from your perspective and in your experience, how can leaders maybe at the top of their organization ensure and train and teach and educate those down in the organization of how to elevate their teams? Because what happens often, right, is at some point that doesn't penetrate beyond a certain level. And so I'm just curious, in your perspective, how do you really get that just so deeply hardwired into the culture of an organization?
Yeah, I think it was Saint Francis of Assisi. He said, "In all that you do, spread the gospel, and if needed, use words." So, in other words, you gotta exemplify it. You gotta really act it out. And I think words are actually critically important to that. But I think it's the day to day actions. It's the consistency in that. It doesn't matter if you're talking to senior most leader or frontline associate. I think expressing that consistently, expressing it with I think with vigor, with passion, is so critical in this. So you got to walk the talk, right? At the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day, and it people watch you. They're watching you as a leader. They're seeing in those moments when you're not expecting. They're watching, and so from my perspective, I think showing up every day with that intentionality, with elevating people in a consistent way, even in private, in public, at a town hall, in a one-on-one. To me, I think that consistency speaks to how it's really innately you're innately supporting that, right? So that's my perspective on it. That's what I do my best. I'm not perfect, right? But every single day, that's what I try to do, no matter who I'm engaging with.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I just have? I have the sense that even with a handful of minutes that people have been able to spend listening to you, watching you, Alan, I'm hoping that they have the same sense that I did in such a short amount of time. That I really is so rewarding to spend time with you. It's so grounding to be in your presence. I mean, just like I remember, I mean, certainly in every role that I've had, there have been times when the world was just on fire, but I could come into your space and it was just like, oh, this space is nice. I like it here. I like it with you because it's calming, it's connected. It was always at a human level. It was real people talking to real people. I just such a gratitude for the moments that I was able to spend working with you,
Well,
Allan. Thank you for bringing those energies to my life, man.
likewise. No, Colt, Sarah, I mean, we were in the midst of some tough times with the pandemic, and I always found peace and solace with the two of you and others that we were working with at that time. And those are the moments that I think about more so than some of the painful
Mm-hmm.
moments. Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
PTSD
Sure.
and putting those out of our memory. But certainly, I think you guys are just fantastic individuals and leaders, and that's why we're still connecting today. So I
Wow.
appreciate that, Colt.
Do you know, as you mentioned, Allan, this really like walk the talk aspect of the role of elevating people, certainly within an organization, important to be doing that. I'm actually curious to hear from you. Where is the crossover? How does it cross over between, the professional aspects of your life and the personal aspects of your life, carrying over that element of elevating people? Can you tell us about that?
I I think it's impossible to not carry over, right? I think I've never met a leader or a colleague at work that's been able to separate those two completely. You can't wall
Sure.
those two off. So, from my perspective, I kind of embrace it. I let my team know, listen, your background, your present day experience, what you have going on in your family life, your personal life, feel free to bring that to work, the good and the bad too. And in many ways, um, I feel like the teams that I've built over the years have cared for one another because of that openness to allowing the whole self to show up every single day. And I think if you're authentic, you can't wall that off, right? That's who you are. Me growing up where I did, my experiences with my parents in school, my previous jobs, like that shows up every day too. So I don't know. I embrace it, and hopefully I use it to help, to support, to leverage, to counsel, all of that. So I don't know. That's my quick reaction to that, Colt.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Thank you.
Well, I mean, there's so many things about you that it makes total sense as to why your career is a chief people officer or chief human resources officer, because you are so focused on people. And like we've talked about, it is a part of who you are just at your core. And what I've experienced is a lot of times organizations tend to leave elevating others to the HR department. And I'm curious from your point of view, how can those of us that are more operationally inclined, how can we be better partners with either the HR department or better elevators of our own teams in concert with maybe a more formal organizational development or culture work?
Yeah, I love that question, Sarah. Listen, I'm very biased on this. I think HR is one of the most underappreciated and frankly vulnerable corporate functions in any organization. And if you think about it, there's probably no other function that impacts people more than HR. Pay, your job design, benefits,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
development, performance, it all emanates at one point or another with HR as the steward of the tools, the resources, the capability to enable operators and leaders to do that. So, when a benefits issue or pay issue or performance or an engagement survey goes awry, who you coming to? It's HR, right? And I think ultimately that has led me to see HR as being a very selfless organization. Like we're always going to bend over backwards to support any other element of the organization, in particular, an operator. That's always been
mm-hmm,
my MO. And certainly while we bring the goods around uh, development and org effectiveness and org design and all that, ultimately, it actually lies on the business itself, the operators, those leaders to
Hmm.
really embrace
mm-hmm,
that and to exemplify that and to carry that forward. So HR, it's in the background. It's a service capability. Frankly, we are in at least in the functions that I've been a part of or built, have always been pleased to serve in the background. We're never going to be upfront with that.
Yeah. Okay. So then I guess what that leads me to is as individual leaders outside of HR, departmental leaders, operational leaders, et cetera, want to lean into developing their people, making them as valuable as they can, also retaining that value as appropriate in their departments or in their organization. Can you suggest some specific actions, right, for those types of leaders to take as they want to lean in to developing their people, elevating their people?
Yeah, honestly, I think the most simple ask or a simple step is just to ask. Ask HR for
Hmm.
support. Most
Yeah.
organizations that I think we operate or we know of have a pretty strong HR department. No matter how small, there's going to be an element of accountability for HR to support the leader. But what I have found so often is that they don't know to ask. They don't know to investigate to find where that capability could reside within HR. I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter who in the organization, what leader in the organization that I work with. If they ask, I am bending over backwards to support them. That's what fulfills us, right?
Hmm.
But I think even in the absence of HR, it's pretty simple from my point of view. I think it's just connecting with your associates. It's keeping your ear open. It's really observing, what support they need and responding to that in the best way possible. Even in the absence, again, of an HR team, you could still do plenty to engage with that associate, just to elevate them, to build them up. So that's kind of my
Yeah.
thoughts. Quick reaction to that, Colt.
No, totally. But I want to follow up on this. So, as you sort of defined it in two ways, one is directly interfacing with HR, and two, not necessarily in the absence of HR, but as a leader seeks to be proactive and engaging with their people directly. I'm sure there's also things that people do that you might consider maybe not the best guidance, right? So maybe they're making mistakes, potentially creating harm. As people sort of want to lean into this, are there specific cautions that you want to convey?
I, I mean, there's so much rife in this world. I mean, we're dealing with people, right? And
Yeah,
an imperfect being, right? So,
sure. Yes.
and the bell curve in life just dictates there's always going to be an individual or group of individuals where there could be some issues. So, you know, my perspective is to tread carefully on one-on-one situations if there is conflict. It's really trying to, as quickly as you can, to kind of diffuse and extricate yourself and pull someone in from associate relations or labor relations or an HR generalist or strategic partner, just to be your wing person, if you will. So, um, you guys know this. I mean, we're in a very litigious world right now. There's a
Hmm.
lot of conflict. I think just the culture within our country right now, it's so much easier to drive conflict and drive division. So just tread cautiously on any
Yeah.
people issues that seem to be going down that dark road, if you will.
Sure.
I think, Colt, something that's coming up for me in your question is also every organization has an overall culture, and then every team has its own subculture as an element of that. And I think that one thing that a leader could do is observe the cultures of other teams and their engagement and things of that nature. And if that leader seems to have a good gig going on or a better sense of engagement, a better sense of camaraderie in their team, ask to observe, ask to sit in on their team meetings and learn from your peer group. You don't always have to learn from the top down. And, some people are more naturally inclined to those types of leadership behaviors than others, and so being able to enlist your peer group in your own growth and development has a tremendous amount of benefit
I
as
love
well.
that, Sarah. And you think about, you know, especially a newly minted leader. Wow, I've just been
Hmm.
given this responsibility. There is oftentimes an aversion to vulnerability, right? Oh, I can do this. I'm a leader,
Hmm.
right? I should be able to self-serve this thing. But to be able um, to have the humility to just pause and say, Sarah and Colt have been here 2, 4, 5 years longer than me, they know what they're doing, see the results they're driving, and just pause and be vulnerable. Ask them, hey, can I observe? What are your thoughts on this? So mentorship, I think is a key part of this. Precepting is another key part of this. I love that. You may not have the answers yourself, but hey, be vulnerable. Ask. Have the humility to say, I don't know it all.
Yeah, and I think that vulnerability, again, Colt, you and I've talked about that over the course of many episodes, and that ability to recognize something inside of yourself that says, I need to grow in this area.
Right.
There's no shame in that. We all have those areas that we need to grow in. And part of a great culture in an organization is you'll have those people that want to shore you up. They want to come around you and lift you up when you're struggling.
Amen.
And Allan, I know that this is such a key part of just kind of your career trajectory. And I'm curious how elevating people, if you could kind of take us back to young Allan, how has elevating people, either what you've done for yourself, what you've witnessed in others, how has that led you to the leader that you are today?
Uh, I don't know. Honestly, I think, Sarah, there's a little bit of karma at play at times. I don't know if I can pin it down, but a lot of times I feel that others have more confidence in my ability to lead and impact than I might at times myself. So, and I think we all go through this. Maybe Colt not as much, but there's this there's a bit of imposter syndrome. I think that I deal with. I'm sure other leaders deal with, but uh, honestly, I just kind of ignore it, and I just drive for kindness and authenticity and deliberation and hard work, and things have worked out really fantastically. And I'm grateful that the journey that I've been on, even those really dark moments, some of which we lived in together with the pandemic and
Mm-hmm.
everything else, that all serves a purpose. So I go back to the Allan that started over 20 something years ago. And I think the element of humility and authenticity and kindness, like that's so consistent to what I am today. And I'm grateful. I haven't really changed my stripes too much. Maybe others might think differently, but I feel like that served me really fantastically over the last few decades.
Yeah. Well, I can say that authenticity and the way that you show up has certainly impacted me.
Thank you, Cole. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So I want to ask you. So one of the elements, I know there's many elements to elevating people and to developing staff. One of the elements is just sort of advancing their skills, right? And in the roles that I've held leading marketing and communications departments, I've been a little bit on my own in some respects. Whereas typically what I find in the operational sectors of an organization, there's a really clear path. There's a rigor to the next level of learning and the training that's there. The training is built by the organization and you know the next steps to go through. But it's not necessarily the case that support departments, and marketing is an example of a support department, has this, okay, and then this is what you do with these people, you put them into this next. So one of the things that I've done often, and I'm really interested to get your feedback and guidance on this, is I will ask my team members, usually like twice a year, all right, what's a way that you want to develop yourself? Is there a conference you want to go to? Is there a course you'd like to take? Is there a certification you'd like to receive? And then I have sort of a templatized way for them to communicate that and set out the benefits that they perceive and how they would measure that in the budget, et cetera. Because I've just been inventing how do you advance that role, this role? They've been not necessarily addressed by the corporate structure of training. Do you have thoughts on that type of a
Yeah,
situation?
it's a really good question. In the world that I live in today, I'm focused on uh, development at scale, right? I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
thousands of registered nurses, we have hundreds of other clinicians, and we kind of call it paving the cow path in some ways. Like the number of individuals will naturally find a way to their shift of preference or their role of preference, and you just got to make it as simple and scalable as possible through, like I said
Yeah.
earlier, the cultural element, And then also technology platforms like skill mobility platforms are really big these days, things like Gloat and Fuel 50. But when you get into the smaller roles that aren't as scaled, where volume can help you identify and dictate that pathway, that lattice work of movement, you do got to get creative. You do got to get
Yeah.
scrappy. Sorry, Colt, but you got to find a way,
Zing.
right? So getting creative with that. I love the engagement with the individual because they're owning it at that point and you are empowering them to own it. That is fantastic. And the folks that lean in and engage, that that's a future leader for your organization, someone that's going to push you and challenge you as a leader.
Totally right.
So
Yeah.
I think that is probably the best way to do it without there being a lot of volume or size to help you kind of dictate that. I hope that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Thank you for reflecting your thoughts
Yeah,
on that.
And it seems pretty straightforward. The concept of elevating people, if we break it down, is really being vulnerable and humble and engaging people at the human level. It's what you started this whole conversation
that's right.
with, which is very simple. Why do you think organizations struggle with this so much?
It's a great question, Sarah. I think it's easy for me in my role. I mean, I work in non-for-profit, mission-based healthcare, right? So it's a total alignment, value alignment for me. I think in other organizations, sometimes it's just it's not embraced as a cultural imperative
Mm-hmm.
for the organization,
Mm-hmm.
and so to me, I think you sometimes you got to turn a blind eye to maybe the way that I do something to find someone or somehow to deliver and execute a goal. But to me, I just it's been so easy for me because the organization embraces it. That culture, that spirit
Mm-hmm.
embraces it. It might just not fit every single culture. I hope that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. So,
Yeah.
what are your
Yeah.
guys' thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
I mean, it totally, what you're saying is that the ability to elevate others inside of an organization is really set by the tone at the top, which sets the culture, right?
Yeah.
Is what is I'm just rephrasing what I heard you
Yeah,
say. And the perhaps the tone at the top is unintentionally, could be intentionally, but rarely, is unintentionally setting the tone by their behaviors and their words that elevating others is not a priority.
I think
Right.
so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, there it
That's a
might
shame.
be okay in some instances, right? That if an organization is set in a way that frankly, it's driving for a different purpose, then that's might be okay. And I've
Yeah.
learned to appreciate that and accept it, frankly. But to me, I think it's got to be the consistency, right? If you're
Yeah.
if your board, if your mission statement, if the values, are locked in on that, the consistency is a big part of that. That duplicity is where I think we fail a lot of times as teams.
I remember this. I imagine it was an exchange written in fiction, but it goes something along the lines of two leaders talking to each other, and they're talking about investing, training their people. And the one says, "Well, what if we invest all in the training and really level up our people and then leave?" And then the other person says, "Well, what if they don't level up and they stay?"
Yep.
It's like, well, that's a pretty good point. So I think that, if I think about the culture aspect that you were just talking about, one thing that comes to my mind is this question of, it's like a two-sided thing. Investing and leveling up your people. Like, I want to make my people in my department and in my company as valuable as possible. And then I need to figure out how to make it so that this place, my department or my company, is where they want to continue to deliver that
Yep.
value. Right. So I imagine that if there's this fear around how do I keep the value that I invested in developing, then that's going to shift the ultimate culture of the organization. Do you have suggestions to help address that fear so that the proper culture can emerge to foster that kind of growth?
Yeah, I love your story a second ago, Colt. I think that's so true. And again, I look at it a little bit differently at scale. To me, pipeline development for like a nurse right now is of utmost criticality for our ministry and
Sure.
for other health systems. And if we spend a lot of money and energy investing in the development of an RN, and they go across the street to another
Yeah.
hospital, okay, that stinks, right? But ultimately, we're here to make the market, and that actually means they're going to steal one less nurse from us. So, in some
Right.
ways, when I think about at scale, it's so critical. But I'm not done fighting for that nurse. I think from our point of view, we've been so intentional over the past year and a half of really listening and being curious with our associates. What are their dreams, their hopes, their desires, and we're really articulating an associate value proposition that we feel fantastic about. It's going to attract new candidates. It's going to attract pipeline development. It's going to keep those nurses retained within our organization. And so, listening, understanding, and ultimately developing capabilities and programs that speak to the desires of our workforce. That's so
Great.
critical. And the three that we've anchored into are growth, flexibility, and mission. Three things that I
Mm.
think resonate in our discussion today. We know those to
Yeah.
be really important in healthcare, probably universal, quite frankly. But where we're going to be able to differentiate is not us being able to determine that it's growth, flexibility, and mission. It's executing
Yeah.
programs and culture and sound bites that all are consistent in that.
Totally.
Yeah, and I feel like we could talk about this topic for so long, and we've really just scratched the surface on elevating others because we've really talked about kind of the tactical
Mhm.
things that you just mentioned, and also just that human behavior and leadership development topics. And both of them are really rich veins, to quote my friend Cold Briner, that he'd like to mine.
Yeah.
So, as
Definitely.
people are listening, I'm curious from your perspective if they want to really going to double click on this topic and think about how to elevate their team and they want to start today. Do you have recommended influences, readings, TED Talks, anything that you would suggest to the audience as furthering maybe their perspective on this topic?
Uh, you know, I, I'm probably not as insightful on that as you guys because you're so much more learned than I am and engaged than I am. But honestly, I think where I find a lot of inspiration is just it's keeping my ears open for what other
Hmm.
organizations are doing, what other best practice capabilities out there are saying are delivering on. So I look to a
Yeah.
lot of industry resources, whether it's consultants in my world or
Sure.
third party capabilities. I mentioned a couple earlier on the mobility platform. If you talk to them, if you engage with them, give us a case study. Walk us through what great looks like in this space. I have learned so much about what others have done because again, the universe doesn't start and end with me. I do know that there are other organizations out here in my industry and outside of my industry that are doing this in incredible ways. Again, not everybody, but those few that you can identify. So for me, if you can investigate and find those examples and just find um, maybe some inspiration from it, I think that is a huge influence for me personally.
That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
that is great guidance, and I would say to boil that down to maybe the individual listener, go to your HR department. If you decide that you want to go on this journey, I bet there's somebody inside of your own organization and inside your own HR department that would be happy to mentor, guide, offer additional materials to assist you on this journey.
100%.
Certainly, we hope to continue to invest in people in that way on our episodes, but certainly we know that there are so many people that are passionate about this topic that have gone before us, as you mentioned, Alan, that just have a wealth of knowledge and experience to
Amen.
share.
Absolutely.
So I just would feel a little remiss if we were covering the topic about how to elevate your people, and I didn't touch on something because I want to get your thoughts on this before we end here, Alan. One of the things that I learned in the course of my career, it was actually a pretty significant shift for me, where I had previously been of a mind that the things that I had developed, my templates, my processes, my approaches, these were things that if I kept them to myself, they would make me valuable. It's the fact that they're unique to me and that I built them and I know how to do my thing is what makes me valuable. So I need to preserve that they're mine. And then I got into, fast growing company situations. And what completely shifted for me was recognizing that what's really going to make me valuable is how quickly I can turn everybody else into being as powerful as me. The things that attracted this organization to bring me on, right, are the things that they recognized maybe as special about me, what they wanted to bring into their organization. How do I magnify, multiply, extend myself and those capabilities across the people who I'm now working
It's
with?
like
That was a
open
huge
source
shift for me.
development, right?
Totally
Yeah.
right. Yes.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
completely appreciate that. There's power in multitudes, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and you being open and sharing might spark something amongst that group, amongst that team that
Right.
you could not think of yourself. And
Totally
that's
correct. Yes.
I'm big on that. I think that's huge. And I think again, I mentioned hoarding of talent, the talent hoarder. Maybe it's capability hoarding as well. Like, I want to distinguish myself with all of
Yeah,
this, but
exactly.
ultimately I think that that's short-sighted. I love that perspective, Colt.
Yeah, right on. Okay, so just wanting to add an additional perspective to this conversation as I think about it from the employee's standpoint. And I want to hear from you, Allan. What are some of the signs, the indicators that I am part of an organization that is investing in its people, that's elevating its people, that's elevating me? How do I get a read on that?
I, to me, I think it's pretty simple and straightforward. I mean, does your leader want to have that discussion? Are they energized by it? Are they prepared for it? Are they willing to give you the presence that you deserve? And beyond that, I think organizationally, institutionally, I think it comes down to, are there things like talent development?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a learning department that's willing to offer you courses or gigs or experiences? Is there a tuition reimbursement program? Is it is it
Right.
is it going to support you financially? Are they willing to give you the time to do that, even if it means uh, going down to a part-time role? Or
Sure.
taking some time off to do that. So those are the tells from my point of view, not just at the leader level, but at the institutional
Yep.
level.
And
Wow. Great.
I love that you asked that question, Colt, because I do think that elevation is not a one-way street. A leader cannot elevate an associate without their active participation and
Yeah.
desire. And so for you to ask
Yeah.
that question, I think is really important for everyone to think about. This is a give and take. And if you want to be elevated, you have to be open. You have to go with a humble heart and some vulnerability and be transparent about what it is you're looking for and how are certain activities making you feel and what do you actually need, because as a leader, your leader's not a mind reader. They don't know what you're
That's
thinking.
right.
You have to have a level of vulnerability to share that with them. And so I hope that as we kind of close out this episode, we think about it from that perspective, that it
Yeah.
is really a two-way street. Allan, anything you want to add to
I
that?
completely agree. And in our world where spans of control are so large, I mean, sometimes 50, 60 more associates, it's tough as a leader to elicit that out of your team. But I think being intentional that for me, where I have a lot less folks that report to me, that is a basic expectation in my touch base with my team. We talk about project updates, we talk about goals, we talk about development of themselves and of their team. So I think being intentional about it, and even if it means a once a quarter touch base with someone in a large span of control, you have to give the energy, have to give the effort. But more importantly, that associate needs to know that that's an expectation of them, that if that's where their heart's pulling them towards, they have me to talk to. I'm ready for it. So yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree. It's a two-way street.
Awesome. Well, Allan, thank you so much. This has been, first of all, personally wonderful to see you and spend time
Likewise.
with you again. And to echo Colt's sentiments, always feel just uplifted and grounded at the same time, which is just a skill set that is very rare. So thank you for being that
Thank you,
person to
guys.
us
I
today.
love you, man.
We love you, Allan.
Likewise, and Merry Christmas, Happy New Year's, guys. I'm so humble that you would invite me to this. So thank you so much.
Right on.
All
Thank you,
right.
man.
Thank you, man.
Cool.